The RP Show continues. Game Plus Television, which is available all across Manitoba on Bell MTS Cable Channel 1190. We're so glad that Hustler Paterson could sneak us in. He's one of the busiest guys in show business from Winnipeg Sports Talk. And I was on his show yesterday. I feel like we didn't get to all of the discussion. And by the way, Huss, our friend Don Mitchell, Navy Don, writes in from Ottawa. He says, it looks like tempers have eased from yesterday. He's referring to the volatility coming out of Labor Day Classic weekend. What's the vibe there in Bomberland, man? Heading into Saturday night's game at IG Field.
Roddy, first off, the vibe in Bomber fan inland, and of course, you go way back with Bomber fans as the longtime voice of the Riders. I was checking out the YouTube comments before we came on. There was actually a lot of love for Rod. You know, sometimes in wrestling we talk about the heel turn. You, I think, have had the face turn for addressing what happened on the weekend in the Labor Day Classic with I think a lot of common sense to it. Anyways, people were impressed with the conversation we had yesterday. There's a lot of angles to this. There still will be a lot of fans on both sides that are going to be fired up as they should be for Saturday afternoon. But man, we had a hell of a game, and it's certainly given us a lot to chew on as these teams get ready for the rematch Saturday afternoon here in the Peg.
There's no doubt, and I thank the Winnipeg people for that. And I also want to say it's a lot easier to do this job when you don't care who wins. I think you would agree. You've been doing I don't care, so you see things a little better. The one-game suspension to Pete Robertson, by the way, how did you feel about it?
I mean, listen, I wasn't surprised. I think when you have such an egregious cheap shot on the back-to-back MOP, if there is ever a time where they're going to err on the side of caution or discipline, this was going to be it. Listen, the Bombers were justifiably pissed off afterwards, I think, on a couple things. First of all, on what Robertson did, but more so that they let the Riders off the hook. They were gift wrapped one of the, a glorious, basically they were gift wrapped 4 points in a very tight game in the fourth quarter by arguably the stupidest penalty you will ever see watching football. And they didn't close the door. They didn't finish the job. So I think they were angry about that. As far as the suspension goes, listen, it was egregious. It was dumb. It was dangerous. And everyone was talking about it. I know there were some people that thought it was going to be more than a game. I mean, I never thought that. In other cases, if this was in a 40-10 game against a third-string quarterback, are we talking about a fine? Well, I think there's a good chance of that. But I don't blame the CFL, especially considering the heat they've been taking for protecting quarterbacks and knowing how important they are to the game. To give Pete Robertson that one-game suspension. But, I mean, man, was that dumb, Rod. And, I mean, the Bombers are kicking themselves because that should have been the chance that they received that they didn't necessarily deserve, to help win that football game. But credit to the Riders for coming back, making it happen. I think the Bombers did a couple things maybe to help the Riders in that case as well. And we got an OT Classic and a hell of a rematch coming up.
Well, is it so bad to hate? Let's just go back. These two, I think they hate each other. I mean, leave me out of it and you, but it's good for business. But both games are sold out. I mean, let's just talk about some past ones. Darian Durant's career was ostensibly injured in the finished in the 2014 Banjo Bowl. I remember Chamberlain and O'Shea colliding like rams at midfield before the game one night, smoke going off like this is what you want, right?
Oh, listen, I really do believe that this is far and away the best rivalry in the Canadian Football League. And it doesn't matter. We've always said that's you can throw the records out when these teams play. I mean, there's some truth to that. I remember taking a couple busloads of Bomber fans down, and I guess it was 2011. Bombers were 7-1. Riders were 1-7. Well, the Riders swept. I mean, they won the game, got to 2-7, and then came here and won. I also remember being in the stands when the Bombers got embarrassed 52-0, and we sat at the top of the Taylor Field chanting "All We Want's a Rouge." So there has been ups and downs. Having these teams competitive, having games like we saw on the weekend is great for both clubs. It's great for the Canadian Football League. It's great for the broadcasters. And I'll tell you what, having all the extracurriculars and all the smoke coming out of that game is great for people like you and me that want to talk about compelling matchups that really get the emotion going in fans. And I'll tell you what, these 2 weeks, Bombers, Riders, when you talk about the CFL, I don't think there's a more emotional period for fans that are so dialed in on both sides than what we're going through right now. And that is a very good thing for the league and certainly for guys like us, Rod.
Just before we move on to the National Football League, just the rest of the games this week. And it is our Key Auto Group poll today. What's the game of the week in the CFL? And running away with it is the Banjo Bowl. But the others are Hamilton at Ottawa Friday night, and then that triple header Saturday that everybody's talking about, Montreal at Toronto, Calgary at Edmonton. Has anybody in your mind ran away with it and or anybody completely out of it as we're really in the official second half here now?
Well, I mean, the Argos are pretty close to running away with the East. But I'll tell you what, I mean, it looked like, depending on what happened, I mean, going into last week, BC had lost a couple games, including an inexplicable faceplant at home against the Ticats, who had just lost at home to the Elks. But they got their win. And listen, the Riders did the CFL a big, big favor with that win. Because, I mean, it's game on again in the West. First of all, the Riders are at 6-5, and say what you will about how they got to 5-5 before last week's win against Winnipeg. I mean, they are right there. BC's come back a little bit, and I mean, I think there's 3 teams legitimately in the race in the West right now. You had the possibility of the Bombers not only clinching a playoff spot, but being 2, maybe 3 games up on BC, and I think that would have been a little anticlimactic. So, to me, there's 3 teams battling in the West. I mean, it'll be up to Calgary to, build on that thrilling comeback when they had over Edmonton and potentially put themselves in a position for a crossover. Although, to be honest, I think they're going to have to play much better than they have so far this year if they want to make a reality. And in a lot of ways, I mean, it just sort of feels like Winnipeg, Saskatchewan, BC are going to battle for the West. And whoever wins that is going to get a chance to take a shot at the defending champion Argos, who have looked very much like champions so far this season.
Everybody, I encourage you to download the Bet Regal app, our exclusive and official betting partner, your Kansas City Chiefs, the number 1 team in the power rankings going into the season. Huss, Thursday night, they open it all at home against Detroit. Chiefs favored by 4.5. What do you think on that line, and are they going to repeat?
Well, down to 4.5. I'll be honest, that's the lowest number I've heard so far for this game. But a lot of it has to do with the news coming out of Chiefs practice yesterday that Travis Kelce hyperextended his knee. Now, apparently there's no ACL, MCL damage, which is great. But man, I mean, getting injured 48 hours before the opening game of the season, not ideal. This team's already going to be without Chris Jones, who hasn't signed his contract. That's a massive loss. He is far and away their most impactful defensive player. L'Jarius Sneed, their elite corner, he's been banged up. He's sort of up in the air. So they're not in a great spot health-wise, unfortunately, going into game 1 of the season. But they got Patrick Mahomes. They got Andy Reid. As far as the line goes, I mean, this opened at 7 when the schedule came out. It was basically 6.5 up until last week. And now there's some steam coming in on the Detroit Lions. I'm high on Detroit. I think they're going to be a really fun team. I think they'll be a playoff team. We remember what they started 1-7 and then had that great second half and just fell short. So we should be in for a real treat. I mean, I have a hard time not taking Mahomes and the Chiefs to get this done one way or the other. We'll see if Detroit's ready for prime time. We know that Mahomes is. I think Mahomes is 5 straight season openers, throwing 3 or more touchdown passes. So I'll ride with 15. But I do think that for anyone that thought that this was going to be a blowout, not so fast. Tune in on Thursday night. We should have a great opener between the Chiefs and the Lions. But if I'm only going to need to throw 4.5 down, I'll probably go with the Chiefs. But to be honest, week 1's a graveyard anyways, Rod. I'm going to tread lightly for the first week of the NFL season and not blow the bankroll, hopefully. And bottom line, enjoy maybe my favorite football weekend of the year. Opening game on Thursday night, a CFL triple header with the Banjo Bowl in Winnipeg on Saturday. And then we can dive into all our bets, all our fantasy teams, and make the most of the first NFL Sunday. Let's get it on.
Yeah, and you didn't even mention college yet. Like, I know what it looks like on TV. Imagine being in it. It is insane.
How about your boy, Coach Prime?
Man, insane. Hey, how about him? You know, we talked about that yesterday, how he turns off some people because of the bravado, but guess what? He attracts a lot. And they're all in their top 25 team, Huss. In 1 week, they've gone into the top 25.
It is an incredible story. And if you look what he did at Jackson State, going in and coaching and getting some top players to come to, I mean, the HBCUs were normally not even in competition with the big Div 1 NCAA schools. And Dion changed that. And now that he's at the University of Colorado, a lot of people thought that he was going to be exposed. Well, guess what? He exposed to everybody that he's a winner. He's a master motivator. And he has a passion level that attracts other great athletes. And listen, I didn't know much about his kid at quarterback. I saw all I needed to see in the upset at TCU on the weekend. So this Colorado team, in a lot of ways, is going to be the story. I mean, let's face it. College football has been so dominated by the SEC and a couple of other good programs. To have Colorado emerge as the number one story in college football early on with a personality like Deion Sanders, with the athletes, and I can't remember the guy's name, the dude that played both ways for him. I think he had 141 snaps. I mean, that's football, Rod. This team, love him or hate him, I guarantee you there's going to be a lot of people watching the Colorado Buffaloes when they continue this season. And I'll tell you what, I was never a huge Deion guy, but I'm a fan of what he's doing right now, and I'm definitely here for it.
Kevin, the medium, writes in and says, Prime Time is the best at selling tickets. He's the best at everything. I'll ask you this in 60 seconds or less. Could Jerry Jones humble himself and bring Prime back to coach the Cowboys once they inevitably fire Mike McCarthy, which we will? Would Jerry be smart enough to do that?
You know, that's a really interesting question because, as I said, Deion hasn't been doing this for a long time, but he has had great results. And I'm not sure what the difference is from taking a bunch of young men, talented athletes at the college level, as opposed to going into an NFL locker room and being the guy. That being said, Deion has won everywhere he's been. And much like we talk about college young players, I mean, he can also go in and I think command the respect of NFL players. I'll tell you what, that would be a dream come true for the National Football League. If that happens, I mean, love them or hate them, the Dallas Cowboys are a team that gets a ton of attention. And I think the only way they could get more attention maybe is if Deion was involved in the coaching staff. That is a hell of an idea. And I do think Mike McCarthy is one of the most inept coaches in the NFL and holds the Cowboys back. So to be honest, I don't think it would be a bad idea if you were a Cowboys fan, but we're probably a year or two away from anything like that happening.
Yep. Right now, we couldn't get Jerry and Prime's heads in the same stadium. One would have to go, but I would want Prime in there. Hustler, thanks, my man. Enjoy the football.
You got it, Rod. Thanks for having me. And shout out to all the RP Show viewers. I know many of you jump on over to Winnipeg Sports Talk after Rod's done. And we'll look forward to seeing you then on YouTube this afternoon. Have a great one and enjoy the Banjo Bowl and a great week one of NFL.
Break your leg, pal. Andrew Hustler Paterson joining us from the Slurpee capital.